Greetings folks, and welcome back to my little corner of the library. Recently I finished up a video discussing some of the historical aspects to the symbols that Johannes Vermeer used in his famous work, The Art of Painting. You can find that video here. But today I wanted to take a little bit more of a laid-back discussion and chat with you a bit about another aspect of Vermeer's work that I came across while working on that video. Although in reality, Vermeer is just the lens that I'm using to discuss this particular idea. That idea was fairly common in the work of old masters, and it's the idea of the inserted self-portrait. If you look up a person on Wikipedia, what's the first thing you'll see? A picture of them, yes? What they look like, right there, top right-hand corner of the page. In the case of Johannes Vermeer, what you'll see is this image. But why is that actually what he looked like? The reason that we think that is, well, just a little bit of speculation, sprinkle of logical deduction, and just a dash of history. Now, the idea of inserting a self-portrait into one's own work was hardly a new concept by Vermeer's time, the mid-17th century. As far back as 1475, Botticelli inserted himself into his work, The Adoration of the Magi. You see him there, right-hand side of the canvas, kind of staring right out at the viewer? Consider this work, 1637 by Rembrandt. It's called The Prodigal Son in the Brothel. And see there at the center? Glass raised, having a merry old time, this grinning figure bears a strong resemblance to the actual self-portraits Rembrandt painted throughout his lifetime. Albrecht Dürer, cheeky bugger that he was, just could not help but insert himself into his own works. And I'm not talking about the litany of self-portraits that he made over the course of his lifetime. He was a master of the self-portrait, but that's not what we're talking about here. No, we're talking about works that other people paid him to do that he just had to throw an image of himself into. Now, this is one of his altarpieces, titled The Adoration of the Trinity. Now, there's lots of grand, colorful figures all throughout this work, all of them either referencing the Trinity or other figures in the work, except for one. Down there, way down at the bottom, tiny little man standing on a hill, holding up a sign. This figure pops up again in even greater detail in Dürer's painting, The Martyrdom of the 10,000. Right there in the center of the painting, amidst all of the carnage, looking just absolutely disinterested and unconcerned with what was going on around him, a man stands there, holding a sign, looking out at the viewer. And, yet again, in Dürer's 1506 altarpiece, The Feast of Rose Garlands, standing there at the right side of the image, staring out at the viewer, fella, fancy coat, holding a sign. He just couldn't help himself. This is, again, it should be mentioned at this point that all of these were commissioned pieces, things that other people paid him to do, and he had to throw a picture of himself into all of them, as if doing his own self-portraits wasn't enough. I should also mention the sign, by the way, was another way of serving as his signature. In the case of the Feast of the Rose Garlands, it reads, "Painted in the space of 5 months by the German Albrecht Dürer." Cheeky, cheeky bugger. So, by the time Vermeer got started, the idea of tossing a picture of oneself into one's own work was, relatively speaking, old hat. The portrait of Vermeer, the quote-unquote self-portrait, appears in a very early work of his entitled The Procuress. These types of brothel scenes were actually very common and popular during the Dutch Golden Age of painting. Vermeer's mother-in-law, Maria Thins, actually owned similar work by Dirk van Babberen, also entitled The Procuress. Vermeer himself actually used this work that belonged to his mother-in-law by Dirk van Babberen as a set piece in 2 of his other works, Lady Seated at a Virginal, right there in the background, and again in The Concert. Now, the first of 2 reasons that people label this a probable self-portrait of Vermeer is the figure's attire. The clothes he's wearing, the slashed black jacket and large black beret, look remarkably similar to the attire being worn by the painter in Vermeer's The Art of Painting. Now, the second reason is arrived at by comparing Vermeer's self-portrait to those of other artists. Now, take a look at all of the other inserted self-portraits that we've looked at so far. In every single case, the artist is breaking the fourth wall. He's referencing the viewer, staring out at the viewer. Now look through Vermeer's work. There are lots of instances of people breaking the fourth wall, referencing the viewer, almost making the viewer seem a part of these quiet indoor domestic scenes that Vermeer so famously depicted. But with the exception of the figure in the Procuress, every single one of them is a woman. The only time a male figure breaks the fourth wall is in the Procuress. So, between the attire, similar to the figure of the painter in the art of painting, and the fact that this figure is breaking the fourth wall, similar to the accepted style of an inserted self-portrait in those days, we arrive at the idea that this figure might have been a self-portrait of Vermeer. Now, Vermeer did actually paint a legitimate self-portrait. In 1696, it was listed in an inventory of an auction along with 20 other of his works, but what happened to it since then is unknown. When and if it turns up, we can compare it to the image in the Procuress to determine if this image is in fact a self-portrait of Vermeer, but until that happens, it seems like this small image in the corner of a canvas is going to be the best we have. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun digging through Vermeer facts and stories about Vermeer's life to put these videos together. If you're interested in more art history, there's also a playlist, Bookworm Art History, that you can find a link to down in the description below. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out the door so you stay up to date on all of our latest episodes. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for stopping by.